Folks, three-time former North American Scrabble champion Joe Edley is a legend of the game, and at the age of 78, he's still notching big wins on the scene, including an emphatic victory against a slew of top players at the California Open tournament this past December. His sixth-round game against expert Ken Kasney had a stunning final sequence that I knew I wanted to feature in a video as soon as I saw it. Ken has the first move in the game and plays Redox for 42, hitting the X in just the right spot for a strong score. Joe's first rack is vowel heavy, but he spots an excellent counterplay in the form of Abide for 35, fully overlapping Ken's first word. Ken answers with Wow for 23, and Joe makes another excellent overlap of Dura for 32, making several additional three-letter words and keeping the balanced ERT for next turn. Ken uses his Z to score well with Buys for 35. This isn't bad as far as Z plays are concerned, but this move does block Joe's potential bingo of Tollware through the W, making his next decision much more difficult. A strong candidate option here is just O hooking where for 10, leaving the very strong bingo leave of alter, especially with the dural hook available as an additional line. Instead, Joe plays low hooking bell and dido for 5 additional points at the cost of some rack balance, which is also a competitive option here. Ken responds with veggies for 32, opening the triple lane. Joe's not worried about that though, as he has just one playable bingo here of Peteer for 78, which he quickly plays. Ken leaves the triple untouched as well by playing Hun for just 11, perhaps signaling strong tiles in reserve. Joe draws another vowel-heavy rack, and rather than allow Ken another crack at the open triple lane, he makes his top choice of Naive for 24 to block it and dump 3 of his vowels at once. It turns out that Ken's tiles were in fact strong, including the first blank, and he has only one playable 7-letter bingo, the very difficult find of Dittany. This word plays hooking Hunt for 73 points, but Ken does one better. He places it alongside Peteer with many more overlaps for an additional 10 points. Very nice play finding and board vision from Ken. Joe draws 2 more O's and holds 3 in total here, and while he has good options re-overlapping Dittany, all of them have flaws. Koof for 35 creates a valuable S hook that Joe doesn't have, and slots the high-scoring F directly below the triple word score, offering very easy points back to Ken. Leaving off the C to play just Oof creates better rack balance, but scores only 24 and makes overlaps to the triple even easier. Joe winds up making his best compromise play of Foo for 30, still scoring well while making lucrative overlaps dependent on having the A to hook afar. However, that is exactly what Ken does, countering with the excellent find of Nakfa for 47 to widen his lead, while things get worse for Joe with a Q draw. He's essentially forced to play Sync here as the only play that dumps the Q while also retaining the S. Ken underlaps with Tip for 27, and Joe draws another tricky rack. The G and duplicate R's are the main problem for him to solve here, and something like Gar and Abider looks like a decent option. Instead, Joe makes a similar move of Grog for 12, hoping to draw into a bingo as soon as possible with the existing lines. Ken dumps the UV combination with QV for 20, and Joe draws into duplicated R's once again alongside duplicated S's. He plays Trim for 24, hoping to force Ken into blocking the triple and possibly draw a bingo elsewhere with his S's. However, Ken has the second blank, and while he doesn't have a bingo through the M, he plays Gruntles for 74 off of the G to take an 126-point lead. With only 4 tiles left in the tile bag, this looks like the nail in the coffin for Joe. The standard play here is Jism for 39, leaving 1 tile in the bag to preserve the threat of a bingo. Even after this play, though, Joe will be down by 87 points plus whatever Ken scores on his next move. Even if Joe draws into something like Senora for 86, Ken will only need to score about 15 points on his next move to outrun him, making winning next to impossible for Joe. So, what does Joe do here? He gives up any chance of playing another bingo by playing Jasmine for 45 points. After this play, he goes down by 81 points and things are still looking quite grim. Ken has only one vowel on his rack along with the Y, and he uses them both to play Hoy for 14, likely feeling that he has this game completely locked up and perhaps anticipating the 33-point outplay of Saroma. However, Joe can now reveal his absolutely brilliant gambit. When he played Jasmine, he was hoping for a very specific type of draw from the bag. For starters, he absolutely needed to draw the E to have any chance, but drawing several more of the slightly scarce vowels would help him even more. By forfeiting the possibility of bingoing, he can lull Ken into a false sense of security, potentially spending his only available vowels, after which Joe can then extend Jasmine with just the final E, setting up the fourth and final S in devastating fashion. And in this particular situation, with Ken holding CLLT after his play of Hoy, he has no possible ways to block Joe from cashing in his setup. However, if Joe plays Jasmine with just the lone E, Ken can simply make any reasonable play scoring 7 or 8 points, such as Koi, after which Joe's follow-up play of the 75-point roams will still lead to a 6-point loss. Joe must make one key adjustment here. Instead of just his E, he needs to play OE for 2 additional points. And this is exactly what he does. This play allows Joe's follow-up threat of Mars to place the M on the all-important double letter square, increasing the value of his setup to 80 points instead of just 75. These additional points are enough that after Ken's Koi for 8, Mars delivers Joe an incredible 1-point victory. Rewinding back to the original endgame position, Ken does have straightforward winning plays here. Hyla for 32, threatening the follow-up outplay of Clot hooking Dural, scores enough to win with relative ease. In fact, the engine prefers Octil for 24, threatening Hurl through the ER already on the board. If Joe attempts to set up the big S hook after this, Ken will simply end the game before he gets a chance to cash it. Joe can earn himself another turn by playing Mourn for 8, blocking Ken's lone outplay, but from there, the optimal sequence of Ha for 10, Jasmine's for 51, and Dural for 8 leads to a 66-point win for Ken. Ken may have been expecting Joe either to play Saroma or to simply extend Jasmine with the ES combination at once for 51 points, which would have been entirely reasonable. Anticipating the low-scoring setup and making sure to retain the right vowels to block it would have required impressive foresight on Ken's part. Joe deserves huge credit for coming up with this very creative gambit to give himself a fighting chance, forcing Ken into a situation where a small mistake could prove fatal. At the expert level, converting games like this can be the difference between a solid tournament result and a victory. At 78 years of age, Joe Edley still clearly has what it takes to do just that.